So, hey everybody, I am here with Nathan Woods, and he's a health coach and a kind of mystery coach, I would say. You help people with problems that maybe they have gone to many doctors and they've done all the tests and it's just a mystery. And you are helping them to kind of find the mystery of what's going wrong by using many different modalities that you were using to heal yourself. So today our way into it's going to be gate 6, because that is your vocation. So that's what fuels your life's work. And in your human design, you have it as a hanging gate from a defined emotional center. So you actually choose this gate to speak about, and you're more into human design. So for you, it was like, oh, it's a hanging gate. So my defined center, you are an emotional manifestor. And when you said that, I saw that it was also your core wound or your vocation. So it's extra interesting to see, how we can see it from those two perspectives today. So I want to start just asking you very general, like this 6th gate or the 16th key, how do you feel like it has shown up in your life?
Thank you, Bella. Thank you very much. And mystery is actually a very good way to describe my life. And mystery, first of all, I want to say I was born an extremely sensitive being. I was born so sensitive and also very aware. Like I was born very awake, very conscious, very, very alert. And from a very early age, I could read the energy field. I could look at someone's energy system and understand what was true and what wasn't true. And I would distinctly see it as light patterns in the physical body. Like I wasn't kind of like when you soft focus at something or you're seeing through it and you just see, I guess some people would even say how you train to see the aura or something. But as a child, the brain waves are so unconditioned that they don't have filters. So we don't have these precognitive, these preset things that to view the lenses that we view society and years and years of conditioning on. So as a child, very early, I could see so specifically when someone was being authentic and when they weren't. And authenticity showed up for me as actually the light patterns in the body. I mean, and I want to distinctly put like from here down, because what would happen is in my life and my family, which was also, there's a lot of the conditioning was that the authenticity and the heart and the energy would come up, and it would see the light and the beauty, because when someone's authentic, it's they're one with the true magnetic electrical chemistry that is occurring in their physical body, in, let's say, because their generators are 70% of the world, in response to life. Right. Let's just say that, right? So in response to life, that electricity, that sacral life force comes up, and it's just like, and then it gets to the point where the voice is either it can come out or it doesn't. And what I noticed was there was this break right here. There was a line, and that energy would build up and then it would stop, and then something else would come out. And it wasn't what in the body, it was something that came from up here. So the reason I share that is because this gate, it's actually a big, I mean, when you say core wound, I just want to cry. Like, I'm just like, oh, the lack of intimacy, the lack of connection, the lack of, I mean, the longing, the pain, the disconnection is what this gate was all about for me, I think. And I just feel like how many times I wanted to connect with people on an authentic, on a real way. I mean, I'm a Pisces, which I use as a term to describe the experience, the deep emotional experience I have in life. I'm a very deep person. Also, when I'm on my wave, it's slow. Like, I go at my own pace. And as a manifestor, I distinctly remember not liking being told what to do. I distinctly remember knowing that it's really funny. My mom would call me self-important. My mom would call me she would say, you're very selfish. And because my mom, just beautiful, angelic being, was so she's a Cancer. And so she would be so selfless. And she was also, she had me when I was 18, or when she was 18. So she was a very young mother, and my father was struggling with drugs. So when I'm talking like 3, 4, 5, like really 5 years old, these young ages that I just remember wanting nothing more than connection and to bond with people. And being, I later learned that being a 4-6, I was actually a 4-3. I mean, I was all about connecting so deeply and intensely and then breaking it. Like, I mean, it didn't feel right if I didn't break it at some level. And I don't know why, but it was so important to break those bonds. So I would say that how it shows up for me now is I have seen a lot of this, I want to say, throughout, because of that core wound and because of society. And I grew up in a church. I grew up in the patriarchal America in California, in a Bible belt of California. So here I am, a sensitive, emotional, and if you look at my chart, it's very, very open. So I was very much a medium. I was talking to ascended masters. Like, I don't tell a lot of people this, but ascended masters were showing up as a vibrational attunement. And turns out that they were actually helping me. I later distinguished what the shadow in my life and my society and the darkness in my world was versus who I am. And it was like they would show up just vibrationally to give me this like attunement. And it's almost like, like when you walk in and when you can hug someone who's truly authentically generating a tremendous amount of love versus hate. I mean, it's that black and white. Someone's angry and you're trying to hug them. It's like stone cold, and it's cold, it's hard, and it's versus someone who's soft and warm and loving. So as a child, it was suffering. I mean, it was so painful, and I actually developed an eating disorder. Which I was a binge eater. And I think it's directly connected to this gate and not having connection. I developed an eating. You know what else? And I just have to name this because it's all about connection. I wasn't breastfed as a child. I had a traumatic which might lead to how awake I was, but I had a traumatic birth where my mother had totaled her car in a car accident and was ejected from the car completely in the 3rd trimester. So she's a pregnant woman, and ejected completely from the car and flipped her Mustang. And she barely had, she said she didn't even have a bruise or a scratch. And in my opinion, I believe that we are protectors like angels. And I absolutely believe that I was supposed to be here and that we were protected. So, but that did have a startle on me. And I was born, I pooped I had a bowel movement in my mother's womb, like in her sac, which then meant that when I was born and coming out of the canal, my first breath was actually, it's called mucodium. It's the bowel movement. So in my very first breath in life was actually inhaling my own feces, which is really interesting. I think symbolically, especially because I talk shit, work with shit, and I am constantly helping people with their shit. Forgive me for my term, I mean for their bowel movements and their, helping people with constipation and diarrhea and irritable bowel syndrome and colitis and Crohn's. I help people with those things. So it's very funny to me. But the gate of intimacy, the gate of friction, this is the other thing I've noticed is when I didn't have the connection I wanted, I would create friction to connect. Mm-hmm. I would create it. And my rebellious part, I had an extremely strong rebellion. And being a manifestor, you already have manifestors know, and anybody who knows a manifestor, they can kind of have the chip on their shoulder. They can have the don't tell me what to do. It's a little bit of an FU kind of energy when they're not peaceful. When we're not peaceful, it's like, it's really like F off to the world. And I went through those stages as a teenager. So that was the first answer to the general question. I think you asked me, how does it show up in my life? what was interesting is I developed a lot of coping mechanisms in my life early in life, because I want to distinguish now as an adult is significantly different because I've had 30 years of trial and error. And I want people to understand that this is an evolution, and it's a process, and it is how it showed up in the younger years is much different because circumstances change also. Like, I now surround myself by people who offer genuine connection. And I actually noticed that it becomes a really good gauge of connection. And I'll tell you this, I noticed that I abused this gate I've learned is it's so powerful. You can actually go into a room and start control. I'm going to use this word control, but you can influence the entire room's emotion through my emotions. And it's like, if I can like calm it down or shut, like even quiet everything, or I can lift it up. It's kind of like a knob on the radio, or the volume, or and it's so interesting to realize the responsibility there, and how important it can be, how much it really influences other people. I mean, it really does. And if I'm on a low wave and I'm in my shadow and I'm being inauthentic, I could definitely use it for my own agenda,
Right.
if that makes sense. And this is a room. And particularly it shows up so clear in a relationship, like with my partner. More of my shadows come out in my partnership than anything else in my entire life. My relationships are the biggest thing. And tell me a little bit in response to this. I would like to hear how, because this connects directly to the 59, and the 59 is the sacral. It's a generator. It's the sacral. So I would love to know a little bit about that relationship, because I know that some of my family members have the 59.
Yeah, I first feel I want to go back to what you were saying, and also Ashley, who I work with in the 64 keys, she has the 6, and it's her life's work, it's her personality sun. She has an open emotional center though, and she says the same. She can go in a room and she can create conflict or create peace. So that, it's, and then I thought it was interesting when you said it with the knobs. So we have musical gates. So we have a program actually in the Gene Keys. It's called the Delta. It's 7 gates. So the 6, the 50, the 57, the 20, the 12, and the 22. These are like they all correspond to tones. So it's kind of what you were saying with the volume. That they are harmonics, you could say. So that is interesting. And when we look at the 50 and the 6, we also see that they are similar. They are part of the connection to the sacral on both sides. And what I feel is interesting when I look at your gene key chart is that you have that 6-1 as your vocation or your core wound. Like, if that's the wound healer, so it starts as the core, but then when you like you say, when you go through trial and error, and when you are able to flip that coin and heal yourself, that becomes your vocation that fuels your life's work. But what's very interesting with you here is that you have the 50. So you see these two are here together, and then in your chart they are also geometrically.
That's interesting. I've never noticed that. I have it on both sides.
And exactly. And then you were speaking about your gestation. So when you were in your mother's womb, the core is the 9 months of gestation before you're born, and then the SQ are the 7 first years of your life. So when you're speaking about this, and you're actually going back to before you were born and when you were born, you're speaking about these 2 spheres, which is very interesting that you would speak about the 6th gate in that period of time. And also when we speak about the first line, it needs safety. It needs to hear the mother's beating. It needs to be breastfed. And if it doesn't have that, there is this, the rhythm and the routine of being breastfed, of being safe. It's there. It's so important for the first line SQ to have that certainty that I'm going to get food. Mom is going to be here. I hear the rhythm of the earth. And then for you connected with the first line vocation, that it's actually about the terror. So it's in the collective, this wound is about the terror of having your whole race eradicated. and it can lead to a to a to a like it can lead to repression and a lack of ability to be really honest with yourself. So with this beginning of life and not having that intimacy, you could have repressed your feelings and kind of maybe had them just coming out in conflict or anger, but never being courageous enough to look into that core wound of not having that intimacy from the beginning. And not having, because you can see, the care, the 27 is the gate that is connected to the 50. So we see 27 is about care, right? And then 59 is about intimacy. So by not having that care, although your mom wanted to take care of you at the beginning because of medical reasons, she couldn't be there for you. And the 59 is about intimacy. So you can see that not having these two parts into the sacral energy, into your life force, that could create a repression forever and this like uncertainty about life. So it's it's very telling.
Oh, you just saw into my soul. So 2 things. This is crazy. Number 1, I was premature. So I was 3 weeks premature. My due date was the solstice, the winter solstice, on December 21st. So I was born on the 6th. And guess what? My birth weight, because I was premature, was 6 pounds, 1 ounce. Isn't that crazy? It's 6'1". It's like, what? And I'm like, I got to tell her this. This is crazy. And what you just said, I just want to cry because it feels so acknowledging of the pain I've went through. The repression. I think as a male, we don't talk about this enough. And I learned this from a brilliant woman who studied men for 20 years. And she says men are taught and even designed to do everything with the least as possible. Like they try to survive, and with utilizing the least as possible. They'll go the longest without eating. They'll go the longest without needing remote care. They're wired or taught, I don't know, that way. And I did the same thing. You got to be strong is kind of these things, this patriarchal way that's very unevolved. It's very, very low consciousness. But mix that with already these wounds of not, and my mother's a Cancer. She loves deeply and she loves powerfully. And if I tell people the man I am today is because of my mother, because my dad wasn't even there half the time. So, and the repression is so big. And as a manifestor, you just said it. Like I had a lack of courage. I had a lack of courage, of fear of rejection, fear, everything that happens as a child with emotions. And public school, you don't dare show vulnerability in public school because you will be crucified, you will be ostracized, you will be the picking, and if that ever happened to me, I repressed my anger because I was very much a fighter, meaning right. I check this out. One time, my repressed anger came out. I'm at the top of and I'm about to show my shadow as a kid, but I was at the top of this toy that, the climbing toys that kids get on, and then they do monkey bars. Well, this kid he was just the object of my anger, and he was in my way, and I didn't want to wait. I said, and my aura was just saying, move, I'm here, leave me alone, move. And he didn't move, and he ignored me. And so I just went, literally this small movement just went, and I pushed him off, and he fell off, and he broke his nose. He hit his nose on a cement block, and he was in the hospital for a long time. And the anger and the repression and that was actually an expression of all the repression. And he got it. Men have a tendency to build up. I say males, let's say males, even young men, they kind of take it in and build up, and then they explode a bit.
Right.
They can, and if they're not having healthy releases and care, that's the. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I did that when I was 5 years old, and that happened again when I was in second grade. I kicked a kid in the head as hard as I could, and he was he never, ever, 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 ever was my friend again, and he never felt safe around me again because I hurt him that much.
Right.
Um, and I noticed that that's what I did growing up with the emotional intimacy. Is like I would. This is kind of the destroying. Like this is like the trial and error, like the breaking of bonds. I did that multiple times, and I was in the what do you call it? The principal's office. I was in the principal's office all the time. I had referrals and referrals until I was in seventh grade, and some maturity thing happened, and I became like an angel. Like when I went from sixth grade to seventh grade, um, that all stopped completely. But those first
Mm-hmm.
years, the repression of and lack of connection is probably the biggest wound I've had to learn to overcome. So I just want people to know that if they haven't had their gene keys read, you were able to see directly into um, the most vulnerable part of me. And even just hearing it, I'm just like, because it's early, it's like 8:30 in the morning. I'm like, I want to go do my just go like nurture this part of me, this inner child that because I've been doing wound work. And this is something else I want to share with you is that whenever we have these traumas or whenever we have these experiences that are very hurtful, we have and then the inner child will, if it's traumatic, will split, and they will stop their emotional development. And I will tell you, emotionally, I had a lot of challenge with that. And I'm going back and I'm talking a lot about in the childhood because that's what makes us who we are. That's our conditioning. I'm happy to talk about as an adult now, but I think it would give people the wrong impression of a human life or my life or what it took to get to where I am, because a lot of things I share now they're full of wisdom. They're a lot more balanced. I don't want to give the illusion of perfection as my development and wisdom has brought a lot more alignment. I think it's really important to see the makings of it, the ingredients of it, and then we can talk about how it manifests as a beautiful balance,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I feel like I want to share your chart one more time because it's also you're saying that there was a moment where things started to shift, and this can be what we usually say is that when it fires wrong the first 7 years, then usually kind of there also it's going to be both good and bad in the EQ, but you're an emotional manifester. So when you had all these experiences and you didn't have the intimacy, you didn't have the care as a young child, then then the child can decide or can hesitate, am I worthy of love? Or it starts one day that when it starts hesitating, and then you could have become quite closed and numbed down. So the fourth line is the you could say it's the fourth chakra. So it's that four would numb down the heart, and then you would be deaf for other people's emotions. So you would just be that kind of like really hard and just push people away and push people even if they break their nose. And that that is that when you are closed off from your own emotions. But then maybe there were also glimpses, but like you say, one day I actually got an insight, and I was able to become more kind. Kindness, meanness. So that fourth line was not only a closed heart, but also with age you were able to tune into. I mean, you are a 4-6 profile, so you have that heart too. So we can see what happens from the age from 8 to 14 is this: we are developing the emotions. So, and either we go in a low frequency, and here it's deafness and meanness, or it's about opening the heart and getting insight. So it's that's what you say for me, to go in, especially when we look at the core, to look at the developmental phases. It's so important because this would be, if you don't have access to your emotions, you get stuck in your intellect, and you would be somebody very brilliant intellectually, but there would be a lot of limitations to your life. And those could be physical or spiritual, things you close down in the first years. And they could be emotional, about that meanness or the deafness or the closed heart. And then you would hang out your whole life in the mental realm and being really brilliant, but having all these limitations. So what we do when we work with the gene keys is that we reclaim the emotional, and then we pamper the inner child, and we might even have to go back to the core. So this is like the way back to reclaim your intelligence,
Yeah.
and reclaim the whole being of who you are, so you become spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental, and to have all these, having them in a balanced way. So, and I feel like that's kind of what you have spoken about. And also how today, when you work with people, you're not only using your brilliant mind, there are also the other parts that are opening you so that you can read them in others, I guess, both when it comes to the physical and the emotional, by being an emotional generator and having that much openness, etc., etc.
That was what you just said was extremely potent, because you described my relationship. I I had to learn the the kindness I have and use in my life now is directly connected to being close-hearted.
Yeah.
I've been my emotions have been shut off. My father is non-emotional generator. He's got everything in his body chart is defined, I think, except one. So he has a lot of definition, which created a lot of pressure in my body. And I was like very uncomfortable. And because he had a defined spleen, I had an open spleen. I clinged to him, and then he wasn't there, meaning he was struggling with drugs, meaning so there was a huge abandonment there, and the lack of masculine, lack of the masculine support and modeling. And so what you said was extremely important, because I, to this day, am on a constant relationship with being closed-hearted and hard, and then being open and soft, and especially because I feel so deeply. When the deep feeling, it's like I have to wake up every day and remind myself that I am emotional and that I am a feeler. And because it's so easy, especially because I am smart. I say I have a capacity for intellectual and philosophy, and I love it. And my Sagittarius side, just like, I love being able to talk about philosophy and systems, and I'm really good at it. And but my girlfriend will literally tell me, come into your heart, stop it. Like, you're in your head. I just don't feel you. I don't feel you. And women have been the biggest, I need to say this because women are the healers. Like, women can be, if they're operating also correctly for themselves. But the women in my life have continuously that circle you just shared, from being pushing people away and being hard, and thinking if I'm unworthy of love, and um, being hesitant. I wanted to also mention that the very first time I ever got a reading from human design, and someone told me I was a manifestor. He actually didn't tell me I was a manifestor. He said, "You are a shut down manifestor." I was like, and now since he told me that, I have told people, and when I do readings, I can tell, I say you're a shut down generator, you're a shut down manifestor, because there is a distinct difference between a generator and a shut down generator, or a manifestor and a shut down manifestor. Distinct difference. So I wanted to even say that the hesitancy that you saw in my gene keys led to not only hesitancy, and as a manifestor is designed to initiate, because they know the resistance got so much, it goes to recoil and hardening and shutting down. And I was for many years. I actually went to, I did 10 days of silent meditation, 5 different times as just myself receiving it, and then helping others as so what's called a student, and you just meditate yourself, and then a server, where you're meditating like 3.5 to 4 or 5 hours a day yourself in silence, but you're serving the other students. So you're more in a service role, making food and things. And I moved to Hawaii, on the Big Island of Hawaii, just to reclaim, just to reconnect to Mother Nature, which is so interesting, because what you shared is the rhythm and the routine and the nurturance wasn't there, because in my early childhood, from the first 11 days. So for 11 days, I didn't get to tell you this, for 11 days I was in an incubator, after they had to pump my lungs with oxygen, and they had to suck out the muconium out of my lungs to get me to breathe. And I'm just going to say this because it's really significant. They could not circumcise me, because if they were to do that surgery and I couldn't breathe, I would have died. So at the time, it's very common in America for them to do that. And my mom said she would have just done it. And that would have been traumatic for the rest of my life I believe on an emotional level. Um, um, and for any mothers out there who are thinking about that, I highly suggest you do your research. And from a male that didn't have that trauma, I would highly suggest that you encourage you not to give that to your child. Um, but this is what I want to say is the rhythm, the disconnection. I didn't have that regular. I was in a womb where there's a rhythm. I was in a cold or warm, dark place to a hospital where there's artificial lights. And then I'm in an incubator for 11 days, never able to be held. My mom had to reach through the incubator and like touch me inside this encasing. I couldn't be held. I couldn't be on my mom's heart. I was no longer connected to that body. And there's a lot of trauma there. And I've done many healing things about that. And, different layers come up. But what you said is something I even today am constantly doing and connecting to the earth, like grounding, putting my feet on the earth, connecting to the rhythm of the earth, sleep cycles, and learning about the elements. And like I study Chinese medicine, and it's all about rhythm. It's all about balance of the elements. It's all about earth, water, fire, and air. And the lack of honesty is the last thing I want to say, that when you're shut down and you're not connected to your emotions, and I'm repressing my emotions, and there's lack of courage to initiate and as a manifestor, and being hesitant because there's going to be resistance, or I'm wondering if I'm even worthy of love. And then I'm very hard and close-hearted. So anytime love may come, it's like, it's not getting there. And I'm closed off from my own feelings. That you're describing my inner teenager. Like, that was my years from probably 10 when my mom remarried to a man I didn't even know, without us even knowing, to probably in my early 20s when I moved to Hawaii and started meditating. And but I just want to say today, even though I'm a student and I'm learning, like even with you, like with human design, I do my best to take it out of an intellectual thing. And when I work with people with human design, I'm literally working with their body and their somatic level. And I'll speak something that you'll say something that's so potent and register, but you'll just go right through it because you're connecting it. What I'll do is I will sit with that one thing. I'll say it like a drop in water, and I'm studying the ripples and every ripple. And then I speak to the ripple. I said, did you just see how that happened and that happened and how this felt? And I'll connect it to their somatic level. And I've learned to develop the language that helps them connect to the non-linguistic part of their body.
Right.
And I see that as even a safety mechanism for me to stay in my right relationship so I don't get too intellectual.
Right.
So it's really fascinating. You just did something that, you just unraveled my DNA, I feel like. You know how they did science studies that when you're stressed, our DNA helix gets tighter and coiled together. But when you're relaxed and when you're looking at it, it's very interesting. I feel like what we've done together is softened and relaxed it, and it opens and expands it. And so they say that in order to read the DNA, you actually have to be, that DNA has to be expanded. It has to be open. And this is like hypnosis. Like when you're in a deep state of relaxation or trust or love, the DNA softens and relaxes. So and then we can like in hypnosis, you can go in and start repatterning things, but it's only when you have access to the DNA that's open because you're relaxed and safe. So it's just so fascinating.
Yeah, and what you're speaking to again is that SQ, when you have the rhythm, when you're safe, like the first line is like, that's what Ra says too. Is it safe or is it not safe? Does it work? Does it not work? Like that's the foundation of everything. That's the first line of the hexagram. So that you're speaking to this SQ, and I feel like I want to give one more nugget for you and for people that are watching, because once we understand those phases and what can happen when we turn off here, and then we hang out in our intellect forever, then when we reclaim it, once we are back here and everything is, like you say, expanded, and we are open, what we can do then is that this is Venus on the design side. So if we go back here, we see that that's 50.1, and you have it in detriment. So it kind of tells you that you are going to see, you are going to see corruption. You are going to see no. So it's from corruption to equilibrium to harmony. There is not going to be harmony or equilibrium in the beginning. You are going to have to see with that detriment the low frequencies of it. And it's Libra, right? So it's also kind of, things are not weighing right, and then so when everything is starting to expand, when we have reclaimed all the parts of ourselves, we are able to include, so this is Venus, then we're able to include Saturn. So in the new profile, when we have the Star Pro in the Gene Keys, we're going to have two spheres here. We're going to have first Venus, which is the inner child, and then we're going to have Saturn, which is the inner stability. We can also say that this is the inner feminine and the inner masculine, because once the child is healed, this kind of becomes Shakti. It becomes pure life force. And then Saturn is the nest for that Shakti, or the banks of the river. And the beautiful thing for you is to see when you have reclaimed your own equilibrium, when you're reclaiming your own safety, because now you can choose your relationships, now you can choose to reopen your heart, then Saturn comes in. And in your case, you have the 58-4. And we know that the 58 is all about vitality, going from dissatisfaction, judgment, if you say, up to vitality, up to that life force that we have here in the root center. And the fourth line is about service. So the masculine, when you reclaim when you heal, when you parent your inner child and you find your own equilibrium, you can invite your inner masculine, that stable part of you that is vital and that is also comes from the heart and serves the Shakti, serves the world. It's the transpersonal line. It goes, hand in hand with your life's work, and hand in hand with all the fourth lines that you have in your profile. So part of what can help you to maintain that equilibrium between your physical, your emotional, your mental, and your spiritual is that 58-4. So that's how we can read that. Once you've reclaimed all the parts, we kind of need a masculine. We need Saturn with his Valium to step in. So for you, it's kind of what you do with your work too. You are working with people that come to you, they're dissatisfied, they're not in vitality, and you serve them through your heart. And that is the fourth line. So for me, it's just so beautiful to see. Once you reclaim your power, then you're ready to serve the world, and you do that in sacred marriage. That's my kind of my way of of seeing this. And for me, it's poetry. I think it's so powerful to be able to thread back that long. But like you say, if the DNA is still like this, you don't get access. You don't get access to your stability. You don't have a nest. You're not held in a nest. So.
Wow. I think that's really important as an analogy that you can use with your clients of the DNA in the line 1, particularly because it's about safety or not safety. And safety is the opening, it's the unraveling, and then not safety is the tightening and the stress. And I think at the root of everything we do and everything we're teaching and everything we're learning, the deconditioning is about safety or not safety in a way. Deconditioning is it safe to be me? Is it safe to be who I really truly am? Because I think we all have to get to that point where we can confront it, and then where we can go through it, and where we can say confront it or accept it or work how every person has a relationship to it. So I have a question about the chart really quick, if you don't mind. And you're a great poet of genetics, Bella. And I will sign that as my testimonial, the poet of genetics. I really like that. My heart is really, I appreciate it, because I can tell that you have the knowledge, but you've married it really well with care and curiosity. And also, I think there's this love component that you have that kind of just melds it all together. But I wanted to ask you specifically about the harmony. So like what you said, that when you get the masculine, and I want to ask you how this leads to the pearl, because somebody told me that stillness and what's the other one? Stillness is one of, and the pearl in my life's work is very much about, when you establish that patience, I just started thinking about it. Well, in the future, I think it even says at the top, timelessness and patience, and then you have stillness and restraint, and these other, the top triangle, it
Mm-hmm.
is all arises out of safety, and all arises out of that inner masculine strength of done my work that
Right.
you're suggesting. Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
Yeah, you are kind of now speaking about the pathway way of individuation, where we basically go from your grounding up until your life's work, and we go through it. I feel like what is important here too, when you speak about the pearl, is that so here we don't see it, but we just said that we have Saturn here, and it's the 58. You can see that when we put the 58 here, the programming partner is the 52. And when I speak about the programming partner is the gate, I can't show it here. I can probably. So when we speak about that, you find the 52 here, and on the opposite side, you're going to have the 58. And these are going to be in the trigram. Wherever you have an open line here on the top, you're going to have a closed line here. So they are mirror opposites. And there's they are programming partners, is what we say in the Gene Keys. And for
Yeah.
you have, your inner masculine is the programming partner. It's a pair, both with your culture and your pearl. So you kind of get this thing here, like a triangle, where they really, really go together, because you have both sides of it. That is it's also like it's kind of having the whole story. So it's connected. I would say for you, that's what we do. That's the last step of the golden path. We thread it together. So for you, you're grounded in the knowing of yourself. Like, you have yourself have the inquiry all the time, what is true, and that's what you're doing with your clients. You're inquiring all the time to get a little bit closer to the truth, because they have been struggling, not finding out, and not even being asking the right questions. But with you, you have the intent of understanding the self, and also knowing your work with the thyroid and all that. And then, in your relationship, what you draw to yourself in your life is like, beings that can be themselves in their naturalness. And again, finding that healthiness, the wholesomeness of the first line. And then your inner marriage is about harmony, and it's about vitality. So that's kind of what that's what the inner marriage, the core of what you are. And then your essence, if you look at you from a cloud, we see this impactful being that can be completely still, because you have worked through the emotional turmoil, you have worked through the physical turmoil. So what you become when all this residue is gone, like you are the mountain, and people will come to you because they see your stillness, and then you're going to be able to help with that impact in their life, because you're going to also be able to help them with the restraint, where that's what manifestors can also help generators with, is like the restraint. Where do you put your energy? Do you focus on everything, or do you have the restraint to put your energy to focus where you need to focus? That is the 52, and that's both your pearl and your culture, actually. And then this comes out as you roll, where you are, you're a server. You speak from the heart, from your own story, and from your own patience, and your answers are timeless, and that is how you serve the world. So that is your pathway of individuation. That is how then the open centers don't matter anymore. Like that's kind of the last little thing with the Gene Keys. At the end of the day, once you're anchored in your purpose and you live out these things from your true self, we don't really need anything else. We don't really need to look at the core wound or the challenge as a human being. Like, it's really just fueling this all the time and refining your core, like re-anchoring yourself. So I don't know if that was answering your question, but I felt like it's the connection between these ones.
That it did, and actually now I remember my question. But what you just shared to me is it's so beautiful and poetic, because we create ideas of what we think we are going to be or what we are, and we're constantly letting go of the ideas and more aligning with what actually is. And I think that's the most potent. What you just shared with me, and I haven't had my Gene Keys read. I'm more in the design aspect,
Mm-hmm.
but the Gene Keys really shows a life path in the way the design doesn't,
Right.
unless you are very well versed in the design, and then someone who's reading the design is able to read it in that way. but most
Exactly.
people looking at a chart can't. I mean, I find very few people who actually are able to read it in that progressively. Doesn't mean they're not there. I just haven't met them yet. And so the parallel between the two, I just want to speak to you that the parallel between the two of those is a beautiful marriage, beautiful mix, and the seeing the seeing how that all works together is like, I feel very it's very interesting. I feel like I'm in a way kind of connecting with my future self, and it's
Hmm.
slightly peeling away. It's peeling
Exactly.
away the layers that aren't me. It's like I even feel like, oh, I've been carrying that layer. That's no, because when you connect to this deeper source of who you are, like when you start talking about even stillness and being a mountain and being the answers are timeless. I'm like, that's me. That's me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, my inner self is like, okay, I know that. Like, I know, because you're speaking to genetics, and it's like when you can verbally acknowledge something that's existing in the body. This is what I do with people's health. When you can acknowledge something's deficient, they're like, wow, like something lights up, and there's electricity in words. You've given a homeopathic dose through your voice and your knowledge and your awareness of leading to what is the truth, what is
Hmm.
what's happening, what's it coming, and what is transpiring, what is to come if you do these things. And you're right. I really also liked how you said if you focus on that, it's not about the core wound, because all that felt integrated. And when you were talking about I don't know, the up and down, what is that?
Yeah, pathway of individuation. So that is, when you become differentiated, when you become free. So it's the same in one way. No, it's the same thing as human design, the same end goal in a way. You're free to be who you are because you're individuated and you're not torn apart by pressure or like things on the outside.
Got it. Oh, so the pathway to individuation is very helpful, because the line 6, let's go back to, we were talking about it, the gate 6. In my relationship, I've been in a relationship for 2 years, and this most powerful, passionate Cancerian woman, who's a 6'3", which has been very challenging in its own way, but has also saved our relationship. If it wasn't for her martyr, like, I would have left a long time ago.
Right.
And I wouldn't have because my closed-heartedness and my repressed emotion didn't make me available enough in the ways that she needed connection. And it was so challenging. I mean, the suffering was real for a while. But I want to say um, that in connection and in my intimacy, there's a healthy level of friction, and it takes friction to grow in everything. I've learned that, and I value, and I feel friction can be so beautiful, but it can be gentle. Friction
Hmm.
can be gentle, and it also can be very coarse or abrasive.
Hmm.
And um, even it's funny, as a Sagittarius or someone who becomes too mental, my words will be sometimes insensitive or tactless, without
Right.
tact. But if I wait long enough and I sit with my emotions, the amount of tactlessness is reduced dramatically.
Hmm.
And as a man and interacting with a woman, I learned this, that men often think of women as another type of man.
Hmm.
Like, we will actually relate to you guys as if you're a man, and so sometimes we're like, tough it up, or just do, or we will be aggressive, and we are not distinctly aware in those moments of how sensitive and how feminine and how the qualities and how beautiful, those qualities are. We're like, like testosterone with testosterone. It's so I share that because that happens to me in my relationship with this intimacy gate and this friction gate. And I have to remind myself, she's not a man.
Hmm.
And I find her, she does the same thing. And I learned this about studies of women too, is that women, like, so men will even get angry if they share with a woman, and it's and they relate to the woman as a man, and they try to talk to him and they don't respond like a man. Men kind of get frustrated because you're not acting like a man. Like, what are you doing? You're being emotional or you're being feeling, and why not just, whatever. Men do that. And women on the contrary feel the same way, is that they get frustrated or don't, they don't like, unconsciously they expect a man to respond like a woman. And they get mad at the man when he doesn't respond like a woman. And whenever I say that, a lot of women really like, oh my God, you're so right. And this isn't my wisdom. This is somebody way smarter than me. But when it comes to this sixth gate, and all of the other things you said, from the inner child to the emotional wound to the harmony and equilibrium to this being steady, in equilibrium, even to this day, I have come, like 2020 is a year of routine for me. It's a year of coming into equilibrium. But my relationship with my partner has been the most stabilizing and safe thing I've had, and I've grown because of it. And it was hard. It was so hard. So with my closed, repressed heart, that's what I wanted to say. And she has been pulling layer after layer after layer. And I want to say that I even experimented a lot with the dark, shadowy aspects of existence when I was younger. And I had actually identified with them. And I identified it. So to peel those layers back and then to increase the light within me has been nothing short of the most challenging thing ever. Because I even had, I wasn't a narcissist, but I will say that I had the tendencies of narcissism, and I was acting them out and actually embodying and relating with some tendencies of that. And I mean, that just tears people apart. And so what I want to share with you is that the narcissist, and this might be really, really fascinating, but using that sixth line to control when I was in those tendencies or to manipulate, is like, manipulation can be very strong with that sixth gate. And if you're in fear of, like, let's say this, if you said one of the things is when I don't feel worthy of love, or I could have not felt that, when I don't feel that, that is when the shadow comes out, because you no longer have the ability, you don't have any real, like, self-respect in a way. Like, yourself, you start harming yourself. You're willing to harm yourself because you're feeling lack of worthiness or lack of love, and then you're going to go try to do other ways that are wrong to get love. And for me, I actually wanted power. So I don't know, where does my gene keys show my relationship to power? Because for me, when I didn't have that love, what I would do is just go want power. And I would do in any relationship, I'd rather be in a power position. And I mean, that would even show up as withholding intimacy. I want to share, and that's a Pisces thing I've learned, is withholding sex with my partners. It's like, no, I don't want it. And when in actuality, it would have been very healing for me to share that intimacy. It would have helped me get through the shadow. It would have actually filled me with love, and which is another thing we could talk about later, and how powerful intimacy is to the evolution. But I've been struggling with power a lot, and I think the sixth gate has something to do with it. Meaning, like, how I shadow used it.
I mean, the first thing that pops out for me is that you have that sixth gate, like we were saying, and then again, if we go back to the programming partners, what's on the other side of the wheel is the 36. So we have conflict here, and then in the 36 we have turbulence, and that is your conscious moon. So it's your drive in a third line that always is going to fail, and try again. That is turbulence. So your drive is turbulence. Your drive is conflict. So of course that would come up in a situation where you're triggered. That is normal. That's just part of it. For me, I feel like when we're numbed down, the power is more about the control thing, and you can have that because of your Venus sequence that you're hanging out in your intellect, and then power over somebody is kind of safe from there, because you don't want to be in your emotions. You don't want to be spiritual. You don't want to even open your body up to the other person. So I would say, and the 4-6 can kind of be that you're safer when you're not interacting, when you're aloof, when you're not really there. And then you have a first line sensuality or sexuality. So also there, it's like, okay, you stay in the first line again, you repress. You don't want to be 2 or 3, like you don't want to go. 1 is before there were 2. So for you, it's also easy to say, well, it's like, I'm better off alone right now. So it's, so that's why when we look at it, everything is thread together. So I would say there's not one place where we see power, but your pearl is power, impact, power. You're here to be that, but in the low frequency, of course, you can use it in a bad way. I would say that the 4-6 can also use something like that, because the 4-6 is not gonna be tyrannical or like in delusion as the 5 line would be. So, but the 4-6 can kind of use this a little bit smarter things, withhold things. We're not going to aggress the other usually, but we can withhold things to make people suffer in a very clean way, somehow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's all there. But I wanted to, I think we should round off, but I wanted to say, that you really highlighted something important. Everything we've been speaking about today is the Venus sequence. And you were saying it's my relationship where I've peeled the layers and where I've learned so much, and where I become basically, in these 2 years, that you have like found so much more of yourself and peeled so many layers. And what Richard Rudd says is that, the only thing that we need really in order to evolve are the mirrors of relationships, and to stay in them and to grow from them. So you are kind of telling us exactly what the Venus sequence is. And I think, to have a relationship as a spiritual path, we might not be so, we are not so used to that, but like to really play with the idea of that, to go back to our relationship and be, okay, who was I before this relationship, for example, and see how much, like when we can stay present in them and open all these parts of ourselves, or be vulnerable in all these parts, like the potential, we don't need anything else. We don't need a God outside of ourselves. We don't, like, if we can mirror ourselves in another human being with an open heart, I don't feel like there's any other path that is more powerful, and also where we become capable of including more and more love, and more love and more inclusion. So I love that you mentioned that, because that's the whole story behind the Venus sequence.
Oh, yes. And I feel like we should wrap it up soon too. But this is like, and it's beautiful because it brings me very present to where I am and to where I'm going. And the Venus, I can't wait till you actually look at my partner's chart in the future. And I told her about you, and I told her that I want to have you read both of our charts, and do a couple session that way. I think I told her that you're really good and that she would like you. And but with that being said, she is an extremely powerful woman, and she's also more mature. Like, so she's in her mid 40s, so she's more like, I'm 30, so there's an age difference. And so she has, it's very interesting because like through a lot of the time I projected my mother on her, and I had to really do that. I had to do my own healing around that and take responsibility for that. But when you say that the only thing that we need, or Richard Rudd said, the only thing we need to evolve is the mirror of relationship, it has been the hardest. It's the one thing I didn't want to see the most. And it's been the hardest thing I've ever done. And I say this to other men who are going to go through this, and women. And it has also been the most liberating thing. Like, it's literally made the most gains. And I will say it's also a healthy relationship, because there are dysfunctional relationships, and there are codependencies, and there are narcissists that are, yes, that mirror will teach you, and you must look at the mirror, but it's not the same as I think what you're referring to is a very loving, love-based, heart-based, reciprocal giving and receiving relationship of someone who's doing their own work, like two people who are willing to do their own work. And if anybody who's thinking about doing their gene keys and actually utilizing this tool to do their work, to evolve, to peel back the layers, to go deeper into who they truly are, how they express, how they show up, based off of, because this is the first time you've actually read my chart this way. I would highly suggest it with you, because basically you're able to listen to them. Like, what I feel is you were able to listen and then connect what I'm already in touch with within myself into how it shows up in the gene key. So it's not like I'm not connecting to it from an intellectual looking at the chart. I'm not confused or trying to make sense of all the patterns and the lines and all the meanings. And I have enough knowledge to know that, like, Venus and some of the things you're saying, it's like, okay, that makes sense. Whereas it could be very overwhelming. It could be very, it could be very intellectual for someone who doesn't know all this stuff. So leave that intellect and that stuff to Bella, while you guys just share what's showing up. And I want to go to more my relationship. It got to the point where, let's say, I am now who I am in the best way, and the best things are working because of my relationship. And it's also really hard because my ego says, no, I did it. And like, my ego says, like, I don't need it. And all these old parts that I still struggle today with giving the intimacy fully, surrendering to the intimacy. As, like, for example, my partner would be making love every single day, multiple times a day, if it was, available. And I'm not, being a manifestor, I also want to say that my intimacy drive is lower than a generator's. It just is. It's different. It's significantly different. And I'm curious, you nod. Is that something you also know about design as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you don't have that motor, you don't have the sacral center that is all the time, kind of flowing and warm. And also, I'm looking at your attraction in your first line. So for first line, it's always one before there are two, and it's you have the 10th gate, so it's about naturalness. So if you are not influenced somehow by if you doesn't let the other person amplify your sacral, and you stay in your one before there were two, and that is natural for you, then it makes me laugh a little bit, because I think it's possible. I don't see that you are helpless because you're open sacral and your partner is defined sacral, and you're going to be, you're going to be amplifying her, and you're going to be, I don't see it like that. I see more kind of like, I smile because I see that you're almost on the opposite. You see her, and instead of like falling into it, you kind of reflect it back, but you don't want to engage, and it makes me
exactly
me laugh.
Right. And I've had to learn how to not misuse the intimacy or the friction, and learn how can I reflect things to her, because also, she's being a 6/3, she will initiate with me like, I'm a manifestor, she's a generator, and 90% of the time she's initiating to me, and I'm like, sweetheart, let me come to you.
Right.
And it'll be right, because, and I hate to say it, but she goes, but if I'm right and ready, and it's the right timing, she's almost always available for that. Almost, if that makes sense. Like, she's ready for connection as soon as I'm available, most of the time.
And these are, I feel we should do another call on this, because we could also look at sexual compatibility, and then there is the more like non-human design or gene key approach, just kind of the polarities of the feminine and the masculine. There's so many perspectives that we could have on this, and to kind of, again, there's no right answer, there's not black and white, but I would like to have a nuanced conversation of what parts to bring in, what parts to, how do you say in English? Just really, there's not one right or wrong. You cannot read in the gene keys how to live out your intimacy. And there are some basic things where I feel like, okay, if you have taken these in account, then you can understand your intimacy better, and also like the dynamics that are there in your relationship. And I feel that is a whole conversation in itself. And I know, as a generator with a warm aura, myself, and being a 4/6, how I have been using intimacy just to soothe that feeling that maybe something is not okay. But then, since you have this capacity of like warming up something that is cold, you use that in order to tell yourself, like when there isn't, like the things that aren't there inherently, you're using intimacy to cover up for it. So that actually is a conversation too. Those strategies that we have that don't come from our true self actually, but that there's a kind of self-soothing that is very tricky sometimes to discern. That feel like, especially being different aura types and speaking about this, because we can see it and read it in each other and reflect it back. And I think that is important to be able to become aware of it. Because even sexuality and sensuality, like sexuality and intimacy, is a kind of shadowy thing. So I think putting the cards on the table and actually have a nuanced conversation is something that I feel very needed.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what you said is so beautiful, because I've distinctly noticed in my partner how she soothes herself through her sexuality. And she wants to warm something that's cold. And especially if something's not going well in another area of her life, she goes like, I just want to make love. And I'm like, love. I'm like, it's funny because I say things, making love's not going to solve everything, but what she thinks it is. And
I'm
then,
not going to say, why not? I think that's the way it is.
and then I realized though that I'm like, wait, there is some truth. Making love does change everything.
Right.
And who was it, Dave Data or something? Making love does change it all. And because I mean, it'll change her mood, it'll change her perspective. Because she also has the tribal circuit, that melancholy, what is it, the channel of emoting. So she goes through the deepest the deepest wave of melancholy, and she has this huge ability to be and it's also amazing is I can distinctly feel her generator motor, and she has a defined root, sacral, and emotions. So everything else is open, nothing, or everything else undefined. So we're both these very reflective like beings with, I have 7 centers undefined, or and then she has 6. And then so that root chakra, I have the pressure. I feel her pressure when she gets, she's either stressed, I can tell, and she's trying to alleviate her stress through sex, I can tell. And she's trying to soothe herself, I can tell. And I'm like, honey, so instead of making love, what I'm going to keep practicing and still is like, she likes just gentle caresses, like meaning like just rubbing her back or rubbing her head, or it's sensuality more than sexuality for her. Like it's being gentle and soft and slow, and all of that helps rebalance our chemistry. And as the 6 for me, that 6 gate, I have had challenge with giving that if I don't want it. If I'm
and I would say it's the 6 gate, but it's also that gate 10 in line 1 before there were 2.
Where is that? Can you show me?
In its naturalness. Sorry.
Will you show me that? Just because I'm not familiar with that in the chart.
So this is your design moon. So the design moon is the magnetic part of your soul that is going to attract everything in relationship. But it's also, of course, the most magnetic part of you is your life force. So that's why we go back to sexuality. And for you, you have naturalness. So to do anything for you in your sensuality and sexuality that's not natural in that moment is going to be a no, because the 10 gate just wants to be in its own being, just wants to be in its own naturalness, in its own ease. And when you're not there, you're like basically sterile. It's the line 1 is sterility and fertility. So there's only a fertile soil when it's natural for you. So if she's kind of trying to push something on you, you're going to be like, no, we're not going to plant any seeds here. Stop. So that's like so normal.
Sorry, that was really funny. Okay, so naturalness. I admit I didn't get that. With you speak very quickly sometimes, and so you said that or multiple times before, and that's very interesting because I also see the self-obsession in my younger years. I see that version of myself, and the naturalness. It's what I tell her. I said, and it kind of sucks because in a way she feels like it's one way. So it's only when you want to make love, or it's only when you want intimacy, that we do it. And so I compromise, and if I compromise a lot. But thank you for saying that, because to me, I feel acknowledged, I feel seen, and I also feel given myself a little more permission to just be and then that naturalness really arising, because extreme fertility comes out of the naturalness. Like I imagine like a buck, a big deer buck in, in rut, and I mean, I'm just giving an example. It's like there's a whole herd to this one buck. It's like, it's just a lot of energy, and that comes, but other than that, the buck's not interested. He's out like grazing, and he's not even interested. So that's definitely, I think, what you described as the attraction, for me.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So
Yeah,
this
and
is
it's not
powerful.
easy to be with, like, sorry.
It's powerful how you can see people this way.
Right. Yeah. And at the same time, going back to energy type, it's not easy to be with a manifester, because I don't, especially as a 4/6, when you have 6 lines in your profile, you're not here to compromise. You're here to always kind of, have your vision and have your ideal in a way. And that is, as a manifester, like, if you're not, if it's not in your, if it's not in your ideal to use sexuality, for example, to soothe something, then it's going to be a compromise, but that is somehow compromising, your soul's vision. So there is something with your partner, and where you, I mean, that's a tricky part of your relationship, but that's also where we would look at, that's why you say it's interesting to look at the whole chart, because then we can find the electromagnetics, we can find mechanics, and where, how to not have one person compromise their design or their energy. So that's for another conversation again. So
Yeah, thank you.
I guess
This has been
we
really
went
good.
over so much.
This is really good. This is Ellie, you're
Yeah,
wonderful.
deep dive in the Venus sequence. Like, that's gonna probably be the the
Yeah,
gate of
let's
friction,
how
the
you
deep
thinking. What
dive
are we
into the
gonna
Venus.
call it? Wow, and
Okay.
I would like to go into the relationship aspect more, because there's so many things that I talked a lot about what built me to be who I am, but I would like to talk about what my life is like now, with not my life,
Right.
but like these amazing tools in relationship that I've learned. And there's so much here. I feel there's more here. So if I'd
Hmm.
love to keep going.
Yeah. Thank you so much for today.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.